and his cabinet taking a victory lap Friday, appearing on the South Lawn just 1 hour after the Commerce Department announced the economy grew by 4.1% in the second quarter. The president is insisting this is just the beginning. And ahead of the midterms, vulnerable Republicans hope he is right. This, despite some economists arguing the growth was sparked by short-term factors, including a rush to buy American crops before the president's tariffs take effect. But the White House maintains this is no fluke.
You look at the optimism in consumer spending, you see the fact that we are in a historic moment in terms of our economic growth. I mean, this is the first time in 4 years that we've seen the GDP break at 4%. Remember, it was economist Larry Summers who basically said that if we get to a 3% growth, that it would be fair enough to say if you were to believe in tooth fairies.
Ellison Barber is reporting from Berkeley Heights, New Jersey, near the President's Golf Club, where he is spending this weekend. Ellison, how big a deal are these numbers for the White House?
Hey, John, well, for the White House, they seem to be an enormous deal. In fact, anytime we speak to anyone from the administration or we hear any recordings or interviews with President Trump or even the one airing tomorrow on Sunday Morning Futures with Vice President Pence, what they're wanting to talk about is the economy and the GDP growth. Despite warnings from some economists that the growth is not sustainable long term, the president is telling Americans the growth is here to stay. He seems to think it'll be a big factor in November and carry Republicans to victory in the midterm elections. The party in the Oval Office in the midterm elections tends to lose seats, but President Trump says Republicans could defy the odds thanks in large part to the economy.
$52 billion drop in trade deficit. That hasn't happened in decades. And it's really something very special. And a lot of that is because of the policies that we're putting in place. And it's going to get better, Sean. It's totally sustainable. I look so forward to next quarter, and I will be campaigning for all of these great people that do have a difficult race, and we think we're going to bring them over the line. So I really believe that because we're doing so well as a country and so well with the economy, I think we're going to be surprising a lot of people.
The president also told Sean Hannity when it gets closer to the election, he said about 60 days before Election Day, he would ramp up campaigning and campaign 6 or maybe even 7 days a week. John?
Overshadowing these good economic news, though, are reports that the president's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, is prepared to tell the special counsel President Trump knew about that June 2016 meeting at Trump Tower. What is the president's stand on that, Ellison?
Right. Well, my producer, Matt Leach, and I just got off of the phone with the president's personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani. We wrapped a conversation with him about 15, 20 minutes ago. He says that their focus right now is on getting a raw tape, that now public tape that was secretly recorded between Michael Cohen and President Trump. He says their next step is they want to get a copy of that raw tape. So the president denies the allegation that he knew anything about that June 2016 meeting. Giuliani told us he's already had 2 experts as well as former FBI agents he's worked with in the past go over the Cohen tapes that are public. Giuliani says these tapes were not leaked from their side, but that they can respond once they've been made public. So here's what Giuliani told us about that Trump-Cohen tape. He says the experts they had look at the tape say it's a tape of a tape and that it cuts off. They say they need the raw version to know if it was cut off when Trump and Cohen were in the same room or it was altered later. Giuliani said that he is not particularly optimistic about getting the raw tape, but again, that is what they want, and they see that as kind of the next step, the next hopeful step here. The tape that we have already heard of President and Cohen is allegedly the only Cohen tape involving President Trump, but Giuliani says that there are more secretly recorded Cohen tapes. He said they all are between Michael Cohen and journalists, and perhaps one is involved with a lawyer. He says, again, even though he says that these leaks are not coming from his side, he said that he thinks that those could potentially be made public soon. But Mr. Giuliani told us that nothing in those tapes, even the ones we haven't heard yet, contradicts the position that the president, or the positions the president has taken when it comes to some of these big issues like that Trump Tower meeting. John?
Ellison Barber traveling with the president there at his golf club in New Jersey. Thank you. For more on the goings-on at the White House, let's bring in Michael Scherer, national political reporter covering Congress and the White House for the Washington Post. So those growth numbers that were announced on Friday, Michael, best growth since 2014. The White House pretty happy about that. They say that voters are going to remember that when they go to the polls in November. Will they?
Well, the White House isn't the only group that was happy. Republican candidates who are facing really daunting odds in a lot of these House districts were delighted to see the president on Friday on message, really driving home that economic message. And that's what they want to hear from the president. That's what they're hoping will carry them over the line, allow them to hold on to the House, pick up maybe a few Senate seats along the way. The problem has been over the last couple months that the economy as a message keeps getting stepped on by other things, the child separation crisis, the turmoil over the Russia summit in Helsinki a couple weeks ago, the debate over the trade tariffs that are increasing on both sides. If you talk to Republican consultants, and I talk to them every week, they say they try and send this message to the White House regularly. Just keep on the economy, talk about the tax cuts, talk about how you're getting better around the kitchen table, and Republicans will be okay.
Congressman Ted Yoho says that focusing on the economy is the ticket for the president, and he compared him to a previous president on that score. Listen to this.
The president's got an agenda that he's moving forward, and I want to go back to Bill Clinton. When you looked at everything he was going through, he won re-election, and he won it, and he said it's the economy, stupid. When you look at the economy today for the people, their paychecks are bigger, they have better jobs, they're spending money, and the economy is growing, as you saw by the GDP. So this is something that people are going to remember when they go to the voting polls.
Typically, Michael, the economy is issue number one that drives voters.
Yeah, that's right. But we're in an atypical, political environment right now, and the president is, really at the center of that. He's not someone who is comfortable driving the same message every day, and every day, usually there's a new fight with someone, a lot of distraction. A lot of these House districts are in suburban areas. There's a historic gender gap right now. Women are not approving of the president like men are. College-educated voters are not approving of the president like those without college degrees. And the president's behavior has become a drag for a number of these Republicans. Now, the thing that worked for him in 2016, doesn't work in a midterm because you're not dealing with the whole country. You're not dealing with the same swing states. You're dealing with particular districts, about 50, 60 of them, where there are Republican incumbents. And a lot of these happen to be, in the suburbs of blue cities. So there's a lot of Democratic voters there. And so that's why the economic message could work in those areas absent everything else. And what we just don't know is whether this message, can be maintained for a week, a month, even a couple days next week. Chances are something else will come up, and we'll be talking about something else on Tuesday.
Let's take a look at some poll numbers broken down state by state in some of the states that gave the president the White House. In Michigan, 36% of voters say they approve of the job he's doing, 54% disapprove. In Minnesota, 38% approve, 51% say they disapprove. And in Wisconsin, 36% say they approve, 52% say they disapprove. Now, the president will tell you the polls are often wrong. If we believe the polls, he never would have been elected. So he would, I'm sure, take these with a grain of salt. How do you take them?
Yeah, I don't think there are many Republicans who are comforted by the president saying the polls are often wrong. They read the polls are consistent. It is true that 2016 was a surprise, but that doesn't mean every election is going to be a surprise. If you go deeper into those poll numbers, the president's approval on the economy is actually pretty high. The president's approval on other things is much lower. It's much lower on immigration, which is something the president talks about regularly. Is constantly bringing up. It's lower on trade, another thing he talks about regularly. It's lower on foreign policy, although he got a bump out of the North Korea summit earlier this summer. So again, I think this is the president's own instincts often working against him, or at least that's the view of Republican consultants. And if they can get an event like they had Friday after that GDP number came out every day out of this White House, I think most Republicans think that they'll be in a much better position than they expect to be in.
Michael Scher, Washington Post. Michael, thank you. We will have more with Michael at the bottom of the hour as we discuss the president's evolving legal situation, as Ellison Barber touched on, with his former attorney, Michael Cohen, now appearing to go on the offensive. Efforts continue to reunite migrant children and their parents who were separated at the southern border. It's now 2 days after the court-ordered deadline for reunification. The Trump administration says it has met the deadline to reunite all eligible families. But activists say hundreds of children remain in government care, still apart from those who are trying to get them across the U.S. border. With more on this, let's go to Washington and bring in Garrett Tenney. So, Garrett, how many children are still separated, and how is the administration defending itself?
Well, John, about a third of the kids, just over 700, are still in government care. And DHS says those children have not been reunited because their parents are not eligible for a variety of reasons. In a statement Friday morning, DHS said in part, some illegal alien adults are not eligible or available for reunification today, including some adults who are not in ICE custody and are instead in the interior of the U.S. or their home country, or who have chosen not to be reunified. The administration will continue to make every effort to reunify eligible adults with their children. So according to DHS, some of the remaining adults are ineligible because they have criminal records, but a majority, more than 400, are ineligible because they have already been deported out of the country. DHS also said 120 parents chose not to be reunited with their children before returning to their home country. The ACLU is pushing back on that claim, though, and argued in court filings this week that some of those parents either misunderstood or were misled by the government and never meant to leave their children in the U.S. But former ICE Director Tom Homan argues that for at least some of those parents, leaving their kids here was likely part of their goal all along.
Some of these people had left the United States without their children, chose to leave the United States without their children because they basically got what they wanted. They got their child here to the United States to live with relatives, get American education, take advantage of the social system, and be the next DACA applicants in 10 years.
And DHS says it will continue to make every effort to reunify the remaining adults and children who are eligible or find family members who can act as guardians for the kids while this court process plays out. John?
So the reuniting for those that haven't been yet, how long is that going to take?
Well, at this point, the government hasn't given a clear indication of how long this will take, but with more than 400 of these parents already back in their home country, DHS officials acknowledge that it will likely be a challenge to track some of them down and then go through the verification process. Democratic lawmakers, such as Senator Chuck Schumer, are suggesting some families may never be reunited, saying in a statement, hundreds of parents are faced with the painful reality that they may never again know where their children are or if they will ever be reunited. Now, we may get some additional details on what the administration's plans are on Tuesday when the head of Customs and Border Protection is scheduled to testify on Capitol Hill. He's expected to face a lot of tough questions on this issue. John?
Garrett Tenney. Garrett, thanks.
You got it.
Well, the White House today approving federal aid for California as that state battles 14 wildfires. In Northern California, the Carr wildfire near Redding, almost doubling in size overnight, killing 5 people so far. Meanwhile, in Southern California, a man is charged with arson for starting a fire still burning in Riverside County. All told, officials say the flames have killed 5 firefighters, destroyed hundreds of structures, and forced tens of thousands to evacuate. We have team coverage. Meteorologist Adam Klotz on the hot weather fueling the flames. But we begin with Jeff Paul. He's live on the scene near the Cranston fire in Southern California. Jeff.
Well, yeah, John, here in Idlewild in the southern part of California, the Cranston fire right now remains at 17% contained, but firefighters out here not taking their foot off the gas. They believe conditions could get worse. That's why they've been spending a lot of their time out here mopping some of these hot spots up. Now, it might not look like much, but one of the firefighters we spoke with says he spent about a half an hour spraying down one of the trees in the area, and it just kept pushing out smoke. Now, further up north in Redding, the Carr fire remains the most devastating fire that's burning. It's doubled in size in the matter of about a day, now sitting at more than 80,000 acres with only 5% containment. The fire is threatening 5,000 structures. That's on top of the 500 structures it's already destroyed. Thousands and thousands have been evacuated, more now being urged to leave, and firefighters say they hope those folks who are being told to leave listen.
The fire ran with such ferocity. There were winds, 70-plus-mile-an-hour winds, tornado-like winds going through. The men and women, the law enforcement officers, the firefighters, they were in there when that happened. They're in there trying to save people. In some cases, people who didn't leave when they were told to. And they're putting themselves in harm's way for those people. That's why we ask, leave when we ask you to leave.
Now, investigators say they've also received several reports of missing people up there in Redding. They have resolved most of those cases, according to them, but they say they are investigating each and every one of those cases. John?
And we were hearing about criminal activity, too.
Yes, definitely some criminal activity. They tell us that, hard to imagine this, but up there in the Carr fire, so much devastation. They've received several reports of looting, more than a dozen cases. That's why they're going to be beefing up security in and around the Redding area where the Carr fire is burning. They're also urging anyone who is evacuating that if they have time to take those things that they find valuable or lock them up in a fireproof safe. Now, coming back out here live, this technically where we are is a part of a crime scene. As you mentioned in our lead, a gentleman has been arrested for arson. One man accused of starting the Cranston fire. He now faces 15 charges of arson and is accused of starting 9 fires, including this one. John?
Jeff Paul in California. Jeff, thank you. So you heard that Cal Fire official saying how hot, dry weather conditions are fueling those California wildfires. In some spots, they're whipping flames into fire-nados like this. Obviously, the weather is not helping crews battling to contain those fires in what was already brutal summer heat. So is there any relief in sight? Fox meteorologist Adam Klotz is here with the forecast for the hard-hit areas. Adam.
Hey, John, huge areas we're talking about that have been hard hit. These are fires behind me. Each one of these icons, a fire of 100 acres or greater. Across the west, there are currently 76 of them. So fires burning across a huge portion of the country. Unfortunately, the weather not cooperating. Elevated fire danger, everything you're looking at highlighted here in some of the pink areas. Yeah, that's right around Redding, one of the fires we were just talking about. Areas where the humidity is very low. The winds are a little bit higher. You're looking at spots in Northern California, portions of Oregon, running up into Washington, and then large portions of Nevada stretching into Colorado as well. So this fire weather, the high winds are going to be continuing here the next couple of days. And again, it's not just about the winds. It's not just about the low humidity. It's also about the heat, and the heat has been intense across portions of the west the last couple of days. These are our heat advisories, watches, warnings stretching across portions of Southern California into Nevada, running up the west coast, all the way up into the Pacific Northwest currently. That's going to be lasting here for a little while also. The highs for today in Phoenix running up close to 110 degrees. Death Valley always hot, 122. And then areas like the Redding area getting up close to 110 also. This lingers into your Sunday with temperatures again running into triple digits for a whole lot of these spots, especially along California. That continues also for us on Monday. Heat is going to be a big part of this story where you're not going to get a lot of relief. Now, on the eastern half of the country, as we're looking at what's happening across the rest of the country, yeah, still into the 90s across southern tiers, but you do notice a little bit of a relief here right along the East Coast. Heavy rain here the last couple of days. Now that heavy rain giving us a brief break as we've seen some of those showers move off the coast here just in the last little bit. Some of that heaviest rain moving off the coast. But it's not over. Another round of showers is expecting in some really heavily hit areas here in the last 7 days or so. How much rain have we seen? Well, there were spots that ran up to as much as 8 to 12 inches in portions of southern Pennsylvania, running down into the Baltimore area, the Maryland area. Maybe some more rain on the way. Not that much again, but still areas where you could see another 2 to 3 inches. More rain down in Virginia, other spots into the Carolinas. So, John, the area that really needs the rain, not getting it, and where we could use a break, unfortunately, maybe a little bit more on the way.
It's the way it goes all too
Yes,
often. Adam Klotz. Adam, thank you. One of the most prominent cardinals in America's Roman Catholic Church resigns as the Pope makes history by sending a strong message about sexual abuse allegations. Accepting the resignation of Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, former Roman Catholic Archbishop of Washington, D.C., from the College of Cardinals. This comes as decades-old claims of sexual abuse prompted the pontiff to strip McCarrick of his ministry in a move virtually unprecedented. Kitty Logan in London has more.
Hi, Dawn. Well, the offer of resignation came after 2 historical sex abuse allegations emerged back in June. The Pope formally accepted the resignation on Saturday. The Vatican says a resignation letter from Cardinal McCarrick was received on Friday. Historical allegations of sexual abuse dating back more than 50 years first surfaced in June. One man claims McCarrick abused him when he was a teenager. And another man alleges McCarrick forced him into an abusive relationship when he was just 11. The Catholic Church has been tainted by sex abuse scandals in the past and is now determined to clean up its image. The Vatican says the Pope wants to send a strong message that sexual abuse will not be tolerated.
What this means is that no matter how important your position, no matter how prestigious, when it comes to sex abuse, you are going to be held accountable.
Pope Francis has, for now, ordered McCarrick to go into seclusion for a life of prayer while the allegations are looked into. He will initially remain as a priest. Now, there will be a full investigation into the allegations and perhaps ultimately a Catholic Church trial. But the Cardinal says he has no recollection of the initial allegation. John?
Kitty Logan reporting. Kitty, thanks. Well, CBS is launching an investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct by its CEO, Les Moonves. This after 6 women told their stories in an article published in the New Yorker magazine. The piece, written by Ronan Farrow, also claims the misconduct extended to other parts of the company. Moonves responding in a statement saying, quote, "I recognize that there were times decades ago when I may have made some women uncomfortable by making advances. Those were mistakes and I regret them immensely. But I always understood and respected and abided by the principle that no means no, and I have never misused my position to harm or hinder anyone's career." New reaction to North Korea handing over what are believed to be the remains of 55 U.S. service members killed in the Korean War. Why Vice President Mike Pence says the development reveals everything you need to know about President Trump. Plus the legal implications for the president and his oldest son, Don Jr., after the president's former attorney reportedly claims Mr. Trump knew in advance of his son's meeting with a Russian lawyer, something the president and the White House have repeatedly denied.
If he's proven to have not told the whole truth about the fact that campaigns look for dirt, and if someone offers it, you listen to them, nobody's going to be surprised. There are some things in politics that you just take for...
Counsel Mueller, then candidate Trump, knew in advance of the Trump Tower meeting between campaign officials and a Russian lawyer. And after Cohen's attorney released a secretly recorded tape, which appears to show Cohen and then candidate Trump discussing a payment to a former Playboy model who alleges an affair with Mr. Trump. The president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, slamming Cohen as a habitual liar, while critics accuse Giuliani of damaging the president's case. Jillian Turner has more.
Michael Cohen, President Trump's longtime lawyer, is now claiming his boss approved the infamous Trump Tower meeting that's become a feature in the Mueller probe. The meeting took place in New York City on June 9th of 2016 and included Donald Trump Jr., Paul Manafort, Jared Kushner, and Kremlin lawyer Natalia Veselnitskaya. The president taking to Twitter yesterday to reinforce a claim he's made several times, saying, "I did not know of the meeting with my son, Don Jr. Sounds to me like someone's trying to make up stories in order to get himself out of an unrelated jam." Now, the president's son has also long insisted that his father had no knowledge of this meeting.
It was such a nothing. There was nothing to tell. I mean, I wouldn't have even remembered it until you start scouring through the stuff. It was literally just a wasted 20 minutes, which was a shame.
This claim from Cohen comes just days after someone leaked a recording of a conversation between him and President Trump about hush money paid to a Playboy model. Now the president's inner circle is speaking out on the matter, and they're painting an unflattering portrait of Cohen.
Number one, he lied to people about taping them, both the president and other people. And not only that, he went to subterfuge in order to do it, like a whole little game, which shows how pathological he is.
Looking ahead, in just a few days' time, the trial of former Trump campaign manager Paul Manafort kicks off in Arlington, Virginia. And insiders anticipate that witnesses there will also be asked about this meeting. John?
Jillian Turner. Jillian, thanks. For more on this, let's bring back Michael Scherer, national political reporter covering Congress and the White House for the Washington Post. So there's been a bit of a flip-flop from Rudy Giuliani and maybe some others at the White House regarding Michael Cohen. It used to be Michael Cohen was a stand-up guy. Now he is not to be believed. So which is it?
Well, you know, when it comes to Trump and his inner circle, if you're helping him, you're a good guy. If you're against him, you're a bad guy. And it can flip on an instant. And that's what's happening here. I think Cohen flipping, which I think is an appropriate way of describing what he's doing here, is really remarkable. There was really nobody closer in a political realm to President Trump, going all the way back to 2011. He was Trump's enforcer. And as we know from the allegations that have come out, he was allegedly, read into the most private parts of Trump's world. Alleged payments to Playmate from Playboy, alleged payments to a porn star. This claim could be really explosive because Trump has tried to define the Russia investigation around this question of whether there was collusion or not. The Don Jr. meeting was a clear attempt at collusion. It's in email. Don Jr. has not denied that what he went into that meeting hoping to get some dirt on Clinton from.
But doesn't every campaign do that kind of thing? Doesn't every campaign look for dirt on the opponent?
They do. Every campaign looks for dirt on the opponent. Every campaign does not try to coordinate with a foreign adversary to get dirt on an opponent. There's a very big difference between those two things. And, I think the tradition has been if a foreign government is trying to involve itself in the democratic process and senior campaign officials find out about it, that's a line that's a place where a line is drawn, and that line was not drawn here. And we know now that Russia did an enormous amount throughout that campaign to help President Trump, going to the length of stealing emails from the DNC, from senior Clinton campaign officials. And we also know that Trump denied regularly and consistently up to a couple weeks ago, it seemed, until he took it back, that Russia had done anything to help him. So, no, I do think this is different. It's one thing to try and get opposition research on an opponent, to talk to other people. But when you have basically a foreign spy service, and we know the way Russia works, coming to the campaign, and then you have a number of senior campaign officials taking the meeting, I think it's of a different category.
To be fair, though, the Russians did try to hack the Republican National Committee as well. They weren't successful.
That's right. It's also true, though, that the U.S. intelligence community concluded that the Russian intent was to help Trump and not Hillary Clinton. So even if they had gotten Russian material, it's not clear they would have released it.
All right.
If they got Republican material.
Let me read to you a quote from The Hill newspaper regarding President Trump and his former lawyer Michael Cohen. It reads, "Both men face significant challenges on the credibility front. Trump's propensity to exaggerate or give misleading statements is legion. Cohen, for his part, once said he would take a bullet for Trump. He also has a history of bellicose interactions with reporters and others who have challenged his then boss. Those who have experience with both men are often skeptical about the veracity of either one." So both pots are calling both kettles black here.
And there's a lot of evidence that both kettles have been black, frequently in the past. Cohen, went to Congress and has previously testified about these circumstances. We don't know exactly what he said in those meetings, but presumably he has been under oath to discuss this stuff. He previously denied the meeting being much of an issue on Twitter. So, yes, I think that is a concern, and it'll really be up to Robert Mueller and his team to decide, where the truth lies when you have a number of witnesses, basically, whose motives are easy to impute and whose history of truth-telling is questionable.
Yeah. So far, though, nothing from Mueller regarding collusion. We'll see.
Yeah, we'll get a report one day.
Yeah, we will. All right, Michael Scherer, Washington Post. Thank you.
Thank you.
For more on this, be sure to tune in tomorrow to Fox News Sunday as Chris Wallace interviews the president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani. Check your local listings for the time it runs on the Big Fox station in your area. Brave Americans apparently finally coming home after a U.S. military plane on Friday makes a rare flight into North Korea, retrieving what are believed to be the remains of 55 U.S. service members missing since the Korean War. U.S. officials hailing the move as a sign of improving relations. In an exclusive interview with Fox's Maria Bartiromo, Vice President Pence spoke about the return of the U.S. Korean War heroes.
And the fact that this president, sitting down with Kim Jong-un to negotiate the complete denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, also had our fallen heroes on his heart, should tell you everything you need to know about President Donald Trump. And my wife and I are deeply moved and deeply honored to be able to be there when we bring our boys home.
Brian Yennis is here with more on that story. Brian?
John, you know, these remains are reportedly believed to be some of the more than 200 that North Korea has held in storage for some time. That is, these weren't remains that were recently located and retrieved. We also know that this was not in exchange for any money between the U.S. and North Korea. These remains under law, for instance, the defense secretary says that they can't, under the law, the defense secretary can reimburse North Koreans for excavating remains of U.S. troops. But the State Department said that in this case, that did not happen. That's important because some critics believe any money sent to the North Korean government will be used for nefarious reasons. Yesterday, the remains were picked up by a C-17 in North Korea and brought to the Osan Air Base in South Korea.